are talking to immaculate speakers and having 110 plus attendees on board right now. Let's move ahead towards our first section, the first panel. May I request, while it's important for us to hear our panel, it is also important for us to make sure that we hear to our attendees' opinion. May I request the CD Summit Tech Master to launch the first poll pertaining to the first panel. So request all the attendees to please take the poll. As per the latest survey of the KPMG Women Leadership Report, which had surveyed 750 executive women from major companies, it is said that 75% of executive women identified have experienced imposter syndrome at various points during their careers. 81% of the executive women surveyed believe that they put more pressure on themselves not to fail than men do. 47% of the executive women believe having a supportive performance manager is number one factor in combating imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome is something there. And if we have the culture where women are empowered to redirect their fears and doubts and turn them the opportunities for growth, it is something which can be tackled. And we'll hear more about it from our esteemed panel who is coming forth, and the poll's results are here. So 10% of the women feel that yes, they have experienced self-doubt all the time, while 82% feel sometimes, which is a worrying number. And 8%, I'm proud of you folks that you have never felt it. And please build upon this caliber of yours. With that, allow me to bring forth the next panel. We have the expert navigator, Amrit Ahuja. Amrit Ahuja has been in the communication industry for over 25 years. I'm sorry for this glitch. Amrit Ahuja has been in communication industry for over 25 years in an in-house brand consultant at the Michael Susan Dell Foundation. Prior to this, she was communication director for Facebook India. Her area of expertise is spread across integrated communication, issue management, employee communication, brand reputation management, crisis communication, corporate reputation management, media relations, advocacy, corporate responsibility, consumer insights, public advocacy. Amrit has been on several boards and is passionate about mentoring upcoming women leaders. And you saw her video bite that she is all supportive of Corporate Diva platform. Welcome on board, Amrit. Put a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for Amrit Ahuja. She would be holding this panel along with the next eminent guest, Arthi Rabikrishnan. Arthi is a founder and managing director of Heena Advisory based in South Africa. Heena Advisory focuses on neuroscience-based coaching and assessment for individuals, teams, and corporates, strategic business consulting to SMEs, and capital introduction to alternate funding sources. Over the course of an intensive 15-year corporate career in the investment industry, Arthi has led multiple successful initiatives spanning across equity research, talent management, capital raising, portfolio management transformation, and coaching across geographies and client segments in business. Her specific approach to relationship advancement has built and sustained inviolable networks of institutional investors globally. Arthi has focused her work predominantly in women empowerment and development, where using her coaching, strategy, sales, and finance skills, she helps women craft their personal and business brands holistically with confidence. She is a mentor on Sherry Blair Foundation for Women in Business and hosts the growing Inspire Your Life podcast. aimed at bringing uplifting stories of real people with implementable advice and lessons learned for listeners' benefit. And I did hear some of her podcast stories, and they are literally inspiring. Put your hands together from Arthi R from South Africa. Another eminent speaker on this panel is Able Wanamakok from Thailand. Abel has 15 years of experience, Hong Kong born, US raised, is a media talent with the ability to work across a wide range of platforms, including TV hosting, news presenting, emceeing for any type of function, motivational speaking, script writing, voiceover work, and presenter coaching in communications, confidence, and public speaking. Abel is the founder of Find Your Voice Asia Coaching, an international presenter, TEDx speaker, motivational speaker, and entrepreneur. She currently travels all around Asia to host conferences, openings, dinners, awards, and other large scale events. Welcome on board, Abel. With that, I hand over the baton to you, Amrit. The stage is all yours.
Thank you, Heena. I'm so thrilled this afternoon to have so many people watching us, and of course, my esteemed panelists, Arthi and Able, two powerful Asian women in different parts of the world. Just for everybody who's watching, please tweet, use the hashtag Together We Lead, because this forum is about women leading together. So once again, I repeat, hashtag Together We Lead. And straight into that, I'm not going to waste any time. Arthi, what's your point of view on imposter syndrome? Is it for real? We saw 8% women said they don't face it. I wish I was one of those 8%, but I want to hear your point of view.
Amrit, thank you so much. And first of all, it's just a delight to be on the panel today. From my perspective, it is indeed real. And having experienced it myself firsthand, I can say so. So I'm definitely in the 82% on that. And the way it manifested for me was I almost felt as if I was going to be found out. I was a fraud, even though I felt I worked hard to get into that particular situation. So it manifested as me not feeling as if I was good enough. But I think, Amrit, it's important for us to break down the term imposter syndrome. So if you look at the word imposter, it means to feel excluded. It means to not belong. And then if you look at the term syndrome, then you consider it as a collection of symptoms that somehow points to some sort of a condition where you don't necessarily know if the cause is in place, or also understand where it's coming from. And, one of the things that I don't enjoy is the fact that we do call it a syndrome, because the fact that we term it a condition almost gives one the sense that it's clinical and it's permanent, which it absolutely is not. And I think we'll unpack that, both Abel and I, as we go through the session. So, Amrit, sorry?
Yeah, go ahead, Arthi.
I was just going to say, I think it'll be really useful for our audience and participants to understand how imposter syndrome actually manifests from a neurophysiological perspective. So if you don't mind, I'll actually work through an example just to give someone a sense of how that works. And I'll use an example from my own experience. So when I presented to my first investment committee, I had a report that I needed to present. I was very anxious because seated at the table with me was a full team of seniors, and I was the youngest one there. So my feelings were quite ambivalent. I was very mindful of the fact that I had all of these insights and experience and a very good work ethic. But because of my age and my comparative lack of experience, I was also quite intimidated. So I doubted myself to the point that I actually began to wonder if luck was playing a part. And there was this fear of being judged, of being mocked, of being found out, and possibly even having my insights mocked or judged, or even being attacked and confronted. So if I think back to that situation, there were these little voices in my head, which were basically the neurotransmitters, the chemicals in my brain, suddenly going onto high alert, because I was starting to feel stress. And stress, as many people will know, is regulated by cortisol. So cortisol is what floods your body in order to help protect you, because your brain feels, oh my goodness, something's going on here. Then there's other factors that come into play, like your serotonin as well, which controls your mood. There's dopamine, your sense of reward and satisfaction. So all of these that control your mood, your sort of ability to identify if you're going to do well, floods your particular body. And in my case, that's what happened. So that's where the doubts start to creep in, and you get all of these physical sensations like pain in your stomach, goosebumps on your arms, shivers running down your spine. This is how your body is reacting. And I'm just giving you a very simplified version of it. There's lots more that goes on and interacts, but it helps one to understand that there's things going on in our brain relating to memories and experiences, which I'll expand on later, that brings forth the idea that we're an imposter in a situation. And maybe let me stop there, Amrit, and we can get more information from Able as well with her experiences.
Yes, Able, tell us, what do you think the imposter syndrome is for real, and your experiences?
Hello, Amrit. Thank you so much, and thank you so much to Arthi as well. And to answer your question, I do believe that it's real. And one thing that I want to emphasize is that there are many symptoms that people say are under the imposter syndrome. And it's very, very important to not identify all these symptoms that you've had and say, oh gosh, I have imposter syndrome. Because the reason I'm saying this is because I never felt like I was a fraud. And when I am placed into a situation, I never feel like I don't belong. But I can say that there were times from childhood and from perhaps cultural or societal expectations that led me to have periods or at times when I feel like I'm not good enough. Or there were times when I feel like, very nervous or anxious. So those are, I say, symptoms that are under potential symptoms of having imposter syndrome. But we know one of the most important thing, and I have to repeat it again, is that our brains tends to, our mind, our ego, you can call it, tends to find things to identify with. One of the things that I used to identify to myself is I'm a victim. I'm a victim of this, a victim of that. That was always the biggest thing with me. And I do not want the people who are watching to say, oh my gosh, I have imposter syndrome. And then you own it, and then you accept it, and then it becomes your identity. Just to give you a quick example, my friend who had cancer, this is her story, and it's a perfect example. The doctor told her, you have cancer. And then my friend, who is a coach also, and she's very, very adamant, she said, I do not have cancer. I am only temporarily experiencing cancer. And I think that is a really great way to change the perspective of not owning something, because you can always say, oh, I'm born poor, I'm born rich, I'm born with this culture, I'm born with that. And imposter syndrome is another thing that you can say that you own. And I please do not want to, I plead with all of you to not say that I have imposter syndrome, but you are temporarily experiencing symptoms that you feel an imposter and that you can overcome it, and you will.
That's wonderful, So I hear both of you say that it's somewhere wired in the brain and we are responsible for wiring it. Just a question, since we're talking about, together we lead. Do you think that men suffer from an imposter syndrome, or do they just get away with it?
I'll let Arthi go first.
Sure, Able. Look, I think there's definitely a higher gender bias when it comes to imposter syndrome, and Heena did a really lovely job of giving us some of the recent stats from KPMG on that way. But I wouldn't say that men get away with it in any way. I think that there's a different set of circumstances when it comes to that, and I actually find that it may be a case where men may find it more difficult to admit it, or even to internalize it, because we need to remember that there's also male biases that are present in our world, right? The perception that men need to have a certain level of strength, and there's only so much that they should be able to show. And then similarly, there's these expectations from women as well, that we are meant to be emotional and feeling oriented and possibly not as ruthless and power hungry as men, because that's very male dominated characteristic. So, where I think perhaps women do a little bit better is that we're a bit further ahead in the curve when it comes to speaking up about it, about finding communal ways to deal with it, those different support structures and ecosystems that Deepika mentioned early on.
Able, what your experience with men and the imposter syndrome?
That was very good, Arti. I really liked your answer. Yes, to be fair, men has their own issues that they are challenged with. But I do think that if you're talking about imposter syndrome, based on it depends on the culture also, of course, because sometimes I see that men in certain Asian cultures and like men in other Asian cultures, they could be different depending on what is the characteristic that says men are and that you can. And I think, for example, like in the US, compared to like in Asia, and when I'm saying Asia, I'm saying in Thailand. I'm not saying Hong Kong or Singapore, because those are definitely more westernized Asian countries. But in the US, I would think that men will get away with not having imposter syndrome because they feel that they have the right to speak up or to have power, and that it is expected of them. Whereas women have a less chance even sometimes to speak. Let's say even in the US, even though US is a very independent and promoting speaking country, I still felt that I had less opportunities to speak when I was in the US because I was a woman. And most of the time, the men are the one that are asked, okay, so what do you think of that? What do you think of that? And the woman tends to stay quiet. But on the other hand, and this also, like I said, links to culture as well. There are Thai men that I have coached here in Thailand who are afraid. They have limiting beliefs of themselves, maybe because of their the way that they were brought up, or the family culture even. So I do think that men get away more with it, but it doesn't mean that they're exempt from having imposter syndrome.
I hear you both say that it is definitely even cultural. So would it be right for me to say that the imposter syndrome is about upbringing, it is about cultural diversities, it is about family conditioning. I remember, like, when I was a little girl, my mom always told me, you know what? You're no less than boys. You're no less than men. You're not going to be less than men. You have to be an equal. And so many times when I'm in a situation where I can be stuck with the imposter syndrome, I hear my mom's words ringing in my ears. And I somewhere identify with both of you, because uh, men do speak up, whereas we women, because of being culturally brought in a certain way, also think it's polite to let somebody else go first. And that's where in different cultures, and I've worked in different parts of the world, I've seen whether it's Asian men or women, they kind of stay quiet. But just on that, and I'm seeing a lot of audience questions also coming up on that. You both have achieved so much, you coach so much. How about some tips for how can you overcome the syndrome, the imposter syndrome? Arti, I've heard a podcast where you gave some really wonderful tips. I'd love you to talk about some of those and also add on some more, so that we understand, how we can really conquer this little bee that sits in our head all the time, and how do we just let it free?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think there's so much that we can talk about, and in fact, I know that Deepika has mentioned a couple of things as well. But let's work through some tips, because this is quite topical for our listeners. And like you said, in that blog post on my Inspire Your Life podcast, as well as on my website, the audience and listeners are more than welcome to go and have a look at that. But I think the most important thing we need to start with is knowing you. So embracing that self-awareness about your habits and, of course, your mindset as well. And once you get to that level of awareness, for me, the next step is then being curious. And being curious means asking the why behind, well, why is this habit in place? And why is this mindset in place? Where is it coming from? Because that level of curiosity about yourself will actually it'll give you some answers, but most likely it's going to give you a lot more questions that you need to answer. And from there, that's where I think we can then start to reach out to our ecosystem of support that Deepika has mentioned and we've mentioned now earlier as well. It takes time for us to understand and to process why and where and what is actually happening with us. So this ecosystem that I'm talking about will be people like a coach, an advisor, a mentor, perhaps even a best friend, your parents, people you admire, like your teachers or professors, your colleagues, even your boss, right? And these are just some examples, but each person in this ecosystem is going to offer you a very different dimension towards your self-awareness. And it's going to range from positive to neutral to even very critical. I would say to our participants, we must learn to embrace all of that and embrace it and work with a professional so that you can actually unpack that in a lot more detail. And I know when people hear the words, look at a professional, they start to think, oh, is it therapy? Is that where we're going with this? That's not what I'm talking about. Therapy is very clinical. Therapy is dependent on the level of trauma that you've experienced. And it could be very valid. It could be very necessary. But I guess what I'm talking about here is to help us understand what are those historical contexts that have actually shaped us to be where we are now in our present, and using that to determine and create a future outcome that's both healthy, productive, and successful for us. I think the last bit, Amrit, before I hand over to you, is to say the final part of the process to be able to uplift somebody out of this is to be able to create some really strong anchors. And these are things that will instigate you to action. So, if I quickly share an example with you, not too long ago, I went through 2 retrenchment processes and they were fairly back to back. Now, anyone who knows going through retrenchment, the kind of toll it takes on you mentally from a confidence perspective, morale, and if that isn't the biggest symbol of being an imposter, I don't know what is, right? So there's so many things that go on. But in that time, I knew I had to make some sort of a decision about what my next route was, where was I going to go, what was I going to do? And the anchor that I chose to use was actually my son, because I wanted to present to him a mom who was whole, purposeful, and well-resourced. And in that moment when I was going through that, I knew that that was not me. So that anchor of wanting to be more and to do more, using my son as that anchor, was what actually helped me to start Prerna Advisory. And 2 years later, to be sitting here with all of you talking about imposter syndrome. So yeah, let me leave it at that, Amrit, and we'll carry on from there.
That's such an amazing journey that you've covered, Arthi. And I can just tell everybody that if you listen to some of the podcasts that Arthi has done, go on to Prerna Advisory, you will really find a purpose in life. Whenever I'm feeling down and out, I just go listen to one of her podcasts because she brings the most amazing guests, and you kind of immediately just bond with them. Great, Able. Talk to us about your journey. You and I chatted, and you also have been through this syndrome. And tell us, how did you overcome it? Because I think that's the biggest thing that everybody's looking at from a takeaway from this, that how do they overcome an imposter syndrome?
Thank you. I can tell you that I have had feelings of being not good enough because mainly of my childhood. I had to, immigrate to the US from Hong Kong when I was 10. And between the age of 10 and 13, I really couldn't speak good English for whatever reason, because I was really shy, because I was going through a lot of changes, having to adapt to a new environment and a new culture, and trying to learn the language. And of course, I also have dealt with a lot of racism, judgments, stereotyping, labeling. I mean, I experienced all of that. And I'm not saying that I'm blaming anybody anymore, but that was just the experience that I had back in the US, back in 1991 in Ohio. And those were the times that was very, very vulnerable, or where I was trying to learn about who I was at the age of 10 and 13. And those were the times when I felt like I was not good enough. And as an adult, once in a while, I would go back to those moments when I feel like I was a little girl and I would feel like I'm not good enough. So when people feel, even if you don't have imposter syndrome or you never felt like a fraud, I definitely have a lot of the symptoms that you can say are under imposter syndrome. And the way that I went about it is once in a while, usually it happens when I'm in the shower, okay? I would go into the shower and I would find myself, I would hear myself saying something negative about something in the past that already happened that I have no control over. And over months and sometimes years, depending on what situation it is, that I felt somebody had wronged me because I had a victim mentality. It was so easy for me to go back and say, I'm a victim, I can't do this, I can't do that, blah, blah, blah. That is a mentality that I have, like a voice in my head, right? And that doesn't happen all the time, because if that happens all the time, I would not be where I'm at today. But once in a while, I would do that and I would hear myself say that. So the first thing I would like to say as a tip is you need to be aware that you have a certain mentality or certain things where you think that, thoughts that is not beneficial for you. And second, you need to want to not have those types of thoughts anymore, because thoughts of the past, thoughts of identity, of being a victim, or whatever negative identity that you have attached yourself to that does not help your growth, you do not need them anymore. Maybe I needed them when I was a little girl, but I'm no longer a little girl. And it's so easy for our mind, which I say our ego, to go back to what is familiar, to go back to what it is that we felt, oh, kind of like, oh, I'm a victim. Nothing can save me. I'll just kind of go hide in the corner and be invisible, and then I'll be fine. But I cannot be like that anymore as an adult. I have my own family. I have my own children, just like Arthi. I need to be a good role model for my children. I cannot have, sometimes I would say like crazy spells where I feel like I am not good enough for whatever reason. It's because I go back to my childhood, and those are the weak moments that you sometimes feel that you have. And those are the moments that you have to tell yourself, okay, I don't want to think like that anymore. How can I help myself? And just like what Arthi said, if you are mindful of certain mentality or thoughts that you have that repeats in your head, and you want to get rid of them or to release them from your mind, you need to want change, because you need to have the intention to want change. And then, because that would be step 3. And step 4, I would suggest you to find a coach. Find somebody who can mirror you, that can help you through whatever techniques that they use to help you. So those are like the 4 quick steps that I would say to conquer your own. So the first one is to be aware. Second is to decide that you want to change. Third is to be mindful that you have these particular thoughts that you no longer want for your present life. And fourth is to get somebody like a coach to help you. That's what I did anyways.
Thank you, Able. And I think you help so many people find voice, because your company is also called Find Your Voice. And I think it's all about just what I hear both of you say is it's all in the head. Get rid of all the negative thoughts and just find your voice. So just on that, and I'm going to just steer the conversation a little bit. Arthi, since you work with so many companies, you coach so many people, you're on the board of various kind of forums. What do you think is that corporates need to do to help employees get over the imposter syndrome?
Yeah, a very, very important question, Amrit. And, I know a lot of the time we talk about culture, all right? A corporate culture that needs to include this or build this in. And I typically find that culture is very fluid. As much as companies have a stated culture based around their values, they actually tend to be fairly aspirational, because the actual culture differs across a wide spectrum, from being in line with what they'd like it to be, to also being completely toxic. Now, what I'm talking about is actually the subcultures that exist within companies, and these are actually unaccounted for most of the time. So these are things that persist at team level, roll up to business level, division, cluster, you name it, whatever the hierarchy could be. So there's that disconnect. And in my mind, if you want to be able to bring about the idea that we can eradicate or at least minimize and reduce imposter syndrome feelings with women, men, whatever within the workplace, you need to start at a bottom-up process. So, at a team level, one of the things that we can ask ourselves within the team is, well, what are we doing at a team level to enable women to embrace their strengths? And I'm going to possibly highlight 3 very generalized strengths here, just to kind of make the point of how it could be used to full advantage. And I'll try and give an example as well. So, the first strength that I think comes to mind for me is women actually know how to lead, because we're very good at growing things, nurturing, right? And in order to nurture and to grow, it means we have to make decisions to enable that. So businesses are in the same sort of, they say also want to scale up. They also want to grow. So guess what? Bring in more women into your brainstorming sessions, into the ideas part, as well as the execution part. It's quite natural for us to feel as if that we can deliver in those sort of spheres. The second one that I would possibly put forward is we typically find it easier to take a multi-stakeholder view, because we not only work and teach, but we also support at a communal level. So in the workplace, at team level, if there's some way to develop fostering these collaborations with different stakeholders at the team or business unit level, you're typically going to find that there's going to be a higher success rate. And maybe the third one, just to highlight, would be, I certainly find this, that women are actually very naturally risk aware, mainly because we work out trade-offs quite easily in terms of cost benefit and all of those things. We tend to do it mentally, right? So I would say, we need to ensure that team level, business unit level, wherever it is, that we're actually taking a temperature check with our people in those teams, with our women, to see what's missing and bring in those perspectives of what could be included. And like I said, you can use this at team level, exec level, board level, whatever level you want to do it, but let this tactical process pervade through your organization, because the more women are called upon to participate, the less out of place they feel, and also the more confident they feel. And then I did see a little comment pop up in the chat box about recognition and visibility. I think let me just quickly address that as part of my answer. Not everyone knows how to deal with being visible, even though you want to be recognized for your effort and your ideas. So to my mind, we need to help our women become more comfortable with this by ensuring there's a culture of inclusion and upliftment. So I mentioned those hierarchies that remain. You typically have a team leader, a line manager, a unit head, and on and on and on it goes. And there's just too many layers sometimes that blocks the visibility and also the quality of your talented women professionals in the workplace. So, for me, the solution is very simple. Dismantle the hierarchy with visibility exercises that actually showcase your internal competence of your women and your staff. And I'll give you a very great example. My first role within one of the large 4 banks in South Africa, excuse me, this particular team would have a monthly catch-up at business unit level, where it would showcase people in the team that were doing inspiring work. People would get up and present. We would even have breakfast together. We'd applaud each other. We'd give each other feedback. And what was really great was other stakeholders were invited as well. So senior managers, others from marketing teams, whatever the case may be, they all made the time to attend. And that really upped the visibility within the organization. So I guess, Amrit, what I'm saying is there's absolutely no need for us to complicate matters in organizations to help women defeat imposter syndrome. There's enough ideas to make it happen. And really, it comes down to the will of the organization. And also for those of us who are feeling a little bit brave, where we can push the envelope a little bit to aid in the agenda moving along. Let me pause there.
Yeah, I think, Arthi, it all boils down to that together we lead. And in organizations, we all need to get together and, help conquer the imposter syndrome. I'd love to hear some of the examples, Able, that you would want to share with us from your coaching sessions as to what you've seen organizations do to help employees get over the imposter syndrome.
I have seen organizations do a lot of confidence building, team building, but not in particular to imposter syndrome. One of the things that I have maybe more experience in is my background, which is half in the West, in the US, and then half of it is in Asia. Of course, my first 10 years is in Hong Kong, and I was just a kid at the time. But in Thailand, also the culture of Asian countries is still quite similar. And I can tell you that, to answer your question and the question from the chat, is that it's very important to give everyone a chance to build their confidence and to show them that no matter your gender, who you are, what's your background, you have something to give. It's similar to what Arthi said. I mean, we are all born for a reason. You are born for a reason and you have a purpose. And you are at wherever place that you're at for a reason. So don't ever question, why am I here? Oh, maybe I don't belong. It's because you are questioning your own present. You are present in that moment. So why would you even ask yourself that you don't belong? So you have to realize that those are the thoughts that is, not necessary. And of course, you do have to have some courage because I can give you an example is that when I studied abroad in Japan for 1 year, after this 1 year, I went back to the US and I was at the age of about 21. And the professor asked a question in a huge hall and I knew the answer. But you know what? After that 1 year in Japan, I was conditioned and I was so scared because I would never have been this scared before I went to Japan. And it's because the culture back then in Japan is that women stay quiet. You do certain things and you do not do certain things. You do not speak up. And that was something that I definitely felt was a conditioning of the 1 year that I was in Japan, in that culture. And I can say that living in Thailand, I can see a lot of females and even male, like I said, in Thailand, who do not speak because they feel like, oh, even if I speak, it's not of importance. Maybe my level is too low, my title is too low, I shouldn't speak. And the leaders of these organizations, the general managers, the CEOs, they definitely need to give the opportunity to hear the voices of everyone and give everyone a chance to speak. Maybe ask them, what is it that you would like for us to help you as an organization? So ask them, as a higher level executive, ask your lower level staff. And I don't mean lower meaning that they're less than you, but that's just a choice of word. People of a different level that you guide. You are the one who have the responsibility to give more chances to others to speak. When you are, for example, if you're GM, you are expected to speak, you are expected to hold meetings. But do you give out the energy that doesn't allow other people to speak when you're speaking? Do you give out that opportunity for people to want to feel comfortable to speak? Because a lot of times it depends on the culture, of how the leaders give out the energy of what is welcomed and what is not welcomed. So it's definitely very, very important for companies and organizations to open this door to raise up the level of confidence and potential imposter syndrome culture that they are boiling up within their own organizations themselves.
That's very helpful, Able. And there was a question saying that, a lot of time people don't get acknowledged for the good work that they do, and that leads to a much deeper imposter syndrome. I think I would just answer that, and I'd lean on both of you to tell me if I'm right, that find your voice, have a conversation, establish dialogues within your teams in an organization if you're feeling that way, because you're responsible for your growth, for your mindset, as Arthi and Able have really, shared with us. And it's a journey. I don't think any of us overcome imposter syndrome in overnight. It's a journey that we all have to take and take external help if need be. If not, there's enough and more that's available online. Join a community, just like this corporate diva community. All of us are able to reach out to each other and have a conversation on how can I without being judgmental. There will be somebody to help you. So I think with that, Heena, we're time up. Or do we have any time for more questions, Heena, or should we just pass on to the next session?
Certainly, Amrit. We have some more time for the questions if you would like to take with Able and Arthi. Our audience have posted in.
Okay, I'm going to just go onto the chat and see what are some of the other questions that are coming out. Yeah, here's an interesting question from Yuki. She's saying, Abel called out the need to build a culture of letting team members speak. However, in reality, people are not so welcoming due to competition. So, what's your experience of building the balance? And I think this is just Yuki is talking about in a corporate setup. So, both Arti, Abel, any of you could take that about talking about building a balance in a corporate culture.
Able, happy for you to start with that.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much, Yukti, for this question. I think you are absolutely right. A lot of times, due to fear, we create resistance for other people. And, a lot of times, this is something that my dad taught me. You have to speak through your action. It's sometimes not always through words. You lead by example. Even if you are at middle or lower level, you don't always have to voice out. Of course, you can voice out, when you feel like, okay, I've had enough. When I speak, nobody listens. Maybe you have to go talk to somebody that you trust in the organization and voice out your concern one-on-one to somebody that you trust and to initiate that. But you also have to have the patience, because a lot of times we have impatience with others. We have impatience with ourselves, because most of the time when we want something, we want it now. We feel restricted because we cannot say what we want to say now. But if you continue to feel this urge within you that you need to voice your opinion, you have to do it through different aspects, different ways. Sometimes it's through voicing. Sometimes it's through leadership. Sometimes it's through empowering people that are next to you or lower than you. Sometimes it's just through action as a competent person that you can be. Do the best that you can. And sometimes it's not just about talking, because leaders, bosses, CEOs, they can always see if you are somebody that they should listen to, that you are somebody that they should trust. And that takes time, and that takes action over time to prove that people should listen to what you have to say. And that's something that I learned personally when I work in corporations and organizations. And this is also something I learned from my dad as well. So yes, it's not easy to build that balance. And maybe you are already balancing it by showing up, by giving an action, by speaking up, or being a good example. That's already an action in work, action at work.
Arti, any experiences that you want to share from the corporate setup?
Yeah, no, I mean, thanks to Yukti for that that question. And I think I probably wanted to just quickly address the competition part of it that she spoke of, because you're quite right. At team level, there is high levels of competition, no, not co-opetition, which is what it should be. And I mean, I worked in a very cutthroat sales team where it was very individualistic. As much as they called us a sales team, at the end of the day, it was based on what each person had to deliver. So it became cutthroat and ruthless, which is detrimental to anything that you're trying to build to from a team culture, right? And I think what learning I could take out from that, and what I obviously put forward to people that I coach and teams that I coach, is you need to look at all of the supporting systems and structures in place that, negate what you're trying to do at a team level collaboration perspective. And this could be simple things like looking at your KPIs. A lot of the time, they're very singular sort of focus. It's about the individual. There's very little team components around collaboration built in there. Now, can you imagine if there was a higher weighting of that would then compel people to actually work together to get to the goal, which quite frankly, I completely believe in, because everyone has a unique strength and a particular development area. And when you do go and hunt in a pack, you are most likely to be successful than hunting on your own. And bringing in different people at different stages actually helps you to conquer and land and do it exactly what it is you need to do. So it is a little bit about that braveness that we were talking about, to be able to ask for it. And I know there's fear around that, and there's a lot of issues that we could dive around fear about it. But if we could start with some of the low-hanging fruit to bring this awareness around, well, actually, you want a team to work together, but you've got all of these dismantling, inhibiting factors. Let's actually try and work through some of those to ensure we can get the team moving ahead, not just on an individualistic basis.
Another question that we have is that how can women empower ourselves in leadership and diversity in 2020? And Hina threw up some facts for us. And also, what I've been reading during the pandemic, more women lost jobs than men. More women got less raises than men. So, really, I think this audience is saying that how do really women empower themselves so that they're not at the attacking end with not only the imposter syndrome but even some of these things. So, any tips from both of you would be great for us to close this discussion.
Shall I go?
Go ahead, Arthi.
Okay, all right. So you're quite right. From our participant, it's a very difficult time across the globe, right? And I mean, I'll just work through my own personal experience. My business is 2 years old, and the first year was things were happening, things were going according to what I thought was my plan, and come 2020 and the pandemic happens, and then things start to dry up. And, I thought to myself, well, as much as business has changed and possibly isn't coming my way, what can I do as a woman to ensure that I don't feel that I am losing confidence or I am backing down and all of those things? So I actually took the effort to make a list. Actually, I'm quite organized that way. Made a list of what are my strengths and what are the things that I'm good at, and what are the things that I had wished I could be doing when I was busy in the year before. And using that as a bit of a visual guide helped me understand, all right, these are the strengths that I want to continue to enhance and embellish so that when things become available and ready again, I'm prepared. And it's also that great confidence booster for ourselves. So that looked like things like courses, joining discussion groups, reading a lot more, doing a couple of certified type courses as well, things that I know I would enjoy, the education element. Then on the development side, there were things like I knew, for example, that, and I'll share this with the participants, I was very shy. So for me, I had to push myself to actually launch a podcast, to put my voice heard, make it heard out there. And another way that I'm doing it is speaking on this engagement. So I'm pushing myself to develop, learn, and grow. So these are things happening in real time. And as you do it, the more empowered, the more confident you feel. And at the same time, you realize, actually, it wasn't that difficult to do it all. It was just that mindset that was blocking you from doing it. So, I would say to everyone, take that leap. Empowerment is not this lofty goal that, you can't attain. Incremental steps will help you improve so that you don't feel as if you're stagnating. So, just take that little step forward and keep inching forward that way. It'll help build you up.
I'm going to share a leap story also after Able is done. And you're absolutely right. We all just need to take that leap. Tell us, Able, about your experience.
To be honest, I do not have too many issues getting myself to do things. I have always been very driven. So you have good things that happen to you when you're a child, and then you have bad things that happen to you when you're a child. So the good thing that happened to me when I was a child is I was always pushed to work. I was always an action-oriented person. So having a drive was never an issue for me. And during the pandemic, even though I haven't worked for somebody for a long, long time, and I have been working for myself for a long time as a presenter, and then recently, expanding into coaching, is that I started, similar to Arthi, I started a podcast, not a podcast, excuse me, a video series or video blog. And at that time, I connected myself to meet different people. And when you're meeting people, you're asking them for advices and they're teaching you things. And to go back to why I started the video blog is that my heart felt that I wanted to do that. It was something, I always was somebody who followed my heart. My mind will have to come second. If my heart said, this is right, I listen to my heart because my heart is always right. So when your heart tells you, you know what, yes, maybe I was, released, or you can say fired from my job, see it as an opportunity to do something that you have never had a chance to do, something that you love. Because when you love something, you put effort into something that you love, you can expand and grow so much quicker than what you were doing before. So I always say to everyone, think of everything as an opportunity, because everything is an opportunity and there are no restrictions, because you are meant to be your own creator of your life. And empowering yourself is to have that mindset and have that drive. And the drive, you have to climb over this, I call it the bridge of fear. We all have fear always with us, and you have to overcome your fear by taking action to do something that will allow you to feel more confident in your ability to overcome that. And then when you have tried, even though you in your mind maybe you have failed, but you tried, so that is empowerment for yourself, that is confidence building in yourself. And do not let that negative talk in your head that says, oh, you're not that good, or oh, blah 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 blah, do not allow that side of you to control where you want to go in life, because everyone wants to succeed, everyone wants to be empowering, everyone wants to have influence. And remember, you are meant to be a creator, so go and create, don't wait.
So much. I'm going to wrap up with that, and it was lovely having both of you ladies. And over to you, Heena. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, lovely ladies. That was a power-packed panel with the flawless, unsoiled, and straight from the heart advice to our attendees. So, dear audience, the good news is that we can overcome the imposter syndrome. 72% of the executive women also say that advice of the mentor and trusted advisor when doubting